Hello, I'm Lisa Sutcliffe, Hertzfeld Curator of Photography and Media Arts at the Milwaukee Art Museum. I'd like to welcome you to the third installment of Collection Reflection, a series in which the curators at the museum are exploring thematic links that cut across our departments to create connections at a time when we're physically separated both from the collection and from one another. In this collection reflection, I'm picking up on the thread of still life and how artists have explored this topic across time and across media. Tanja Paul began this conversation with the 18th century Dutch painter Jan van Os. Nikki Otten followed her discussing this pastel by Odilon Redon. Today, I will be discussing a recent acquisition of a picture called First Set by contemporary American artist John Houck. Here we have what appears to be a very simple still life, a canister of paint and a paintbrush sitting in a jar of water. They sit in a kind of abstracted flat space, and although you cannot see this work in person to understand, the object itself is one seamless photograph. The picture derives its name from the first set of paint and paintbrush that was given to the artist by his Aunt Peggy when he was 7 or 8 years old. And although he was excited about receiving the paintbrush, he left it in a jar of water, and over the course of a couple of months, the water evaporated and the paintbrush rusted. He saw this as an important lesson about the inevitability of entropy and that painting is an act that must be continually practiced. So for this work, he faithfully recreated these objects as a record of this memory, of his relationship with his aunt, and of this lesson of entropy, or the results of the passage of time. In looking at the Redon pastel, Nikki Otten discussed how the medium can reinforce the content of the work. Here, Houck employs an iterative process of painting and photography to create his picture. I spoke with John from his studio last week and discovered that he works in a somewhat idiosyncratic way. I think many of us are familiar with painters who work from photographs. But the way John works is that he first makes an oil painting, which you're seeing here, and then he creates a collage or a series of pictures that reproduce that composition. Here you can see, if you look closely, that he accentuates the rust on the spine of the paintbrush from his memory. When he saw the final photograph, he was surprised to discover that the water in the jar reversed the color behind it, an optical illusion he hadn't correctly anticipated in his painted study. In a way, the jar then becomes the symbol of a lens, or of photography itself, in contrast to the canister of paint. The picture is made of a series of layers of photographs and painting. Sometimes Houck even prints out some of the photographs and uses them as a surface upon which to layer objects or paint, and he leaves behind visual clues to show you the steps in this process. Along the way, he adds layers of paint, like that next to the canister here, or this, which seems to replicate a piece of tape, or here, which creates another kind of shadow. Houck acknowledges that he found play in the painting element of this work. It's messy in comparison to photography. It's less scientific or objective. Even though we know that photographs are not truly objective, they often do represent reality more accurately than painting. And here's a detail so you can see the rust that he has added into the composition to complete the details of his memory. He also leaves visual clues, such as this crease or fold in one of the original photographs he made. So although what you are looking at is a flat surface, you can see evidence of the previous crease, which makes you question what you're seeing. These clues serve to heighten or accentuate the sense of an optical illusion. Houck says he liked when a curator described this process as collage that uses photography as the glue. This collage compiles all of the layers into one seamless image that simultaneously records and obscures the artistic process. It's a record of a form of play, an event that takes place in the studio, a conversation the artist is having with the materials, and by extension, with us. Photography is also historically linked to memory. Let us think again about the jar as a metaphor for photography and memory, as a lens that distorts. So here Houck is also interested in the reliability of memory and the ways in which memory is an imaginative act. He has said, Your memory isn't like a file in your hard drive that stays the same every time you revisit it. It actively changes. His collage of multiple layers of conflicting optical information is also a mediation on the fallibility or malleability of memory, and as photography is a tool of memory. Tanya Paul discussed the impossible bouquet painted by Van Os, who brought together flowers from many different seasons into one vase. Here too, Houck is creating an impossible optical space. One cannot take a picture that would turn out this way because it does not replicate the three-dimensional world that we see. Here, Houck has emphasized in his presentation of the paint canister that it casts a shadow to the right as if it is lit on the left, but it is also bordered on the right, on the left, by a flat area of paint, accentuating its two-dimensionality. In speaking with Houck, he talked about how we are so inundated with photography now that there is a velocity to our consumption so that we barely even have time to look at photographs. This form of illusion, of confusion of spaces that simultaneously recede and remain flat, encourages a deeper form of attention. It is a perceptual game he likes to play to get us to slow down and really look carefully. Finally, I'd like to refer back to what my colleague Tanya Paul discussed about Van Os and his use of illusion and the awareness the artist had of the role he was playing in the fictional construct of the composition. Here, Houck is presenting what appears to be a simple still life that underlings the mastery of his own complex process. And the objects that are most accurately realized are the tools he uses to thwart the realism in his photographs, the paint and the paintbrush. So in a way, it's a photographic still life that celebrates the artist's hand. It highlights the difference between taking a photograph and making a work of art. Ultimately, it's a meditation on the passage of time, memory, the relationship of photography to memory, the reliability of memory and the artifice of photography, and artistic self-awareness. Seeing these works virtually is, of course, no replacement for looking at them in person. And I hope that you'll come and see these pictures in person when the museum reopens. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this discussion, I hope you will visit our website, mam.org, and look for collection reflection. Thank you.